Hello, welcome to this video. On this video we will be reviewing the re-release of this album, In a Glass House by Gentle Giant. I'll just now pose for the thumbnail. No silly faces for this one. I am going to do a proper review of this because Gentle Giant are one of my favourite bands, and I have to say that this album is up there as being near the top. If I was ranking, it would be pretty near the top as one of the greatest Gentle Giant albums that you can listen to. If not, and here's a contentious opinion, perhaps the greatest. So why is this album not seen as the greatest? Often people will think of perhaps Octopus or Power and the Glory, or even Three Friends often get mentioned as being favourites when it comes to Gentle Giant. But you don't get this one mentioned so much, do you? And why is that? Well, because it had a troublesome release, didn't it? Strange thing happened with the record labels, which I'm not going to get into here, but I don't think it was released in the States, so it turned up in the States as a very expensive import. It was released in the UK, but also the band was never very happy with the mix, so it was a bit of a failure, to be honest. In terms of the record company handling this and the record company being able to deliver this product to an audience. This is often a big problem in the old music business. You know, bands would be made or broken on there being enough records in the shops for people to buy it when and if the promotional work the record company was doing worked. You know, get it on the radio, it gets played here, or do a concert here, and then people go out to buy the album and they can't find it. Distribution was really key. And so this album has sort of had a strange reputation amongst Gentle Giant fans. I came to Gentle Giant quite late, and so I had to work very quickly in getting my head around the catalogue. If you go back to my first Gentle Giant video on here, I had to actually get somebody in, my friend Steve Gould, the Progmeister, to guide me through the albums, and he did the ranking to start with. Once I got to know the catalogue, I started to realise that there was a crescendo of genius with this band. Their first album, the self-titled Gentle Giant, is an incredible prog album. If they had done that and not done anything else, we would be talking about that in hushed tones. But it's only because their later albums are so much greater that gets seen now as being not quite fully developed in terms of the Gentle Giant sound. Because, of course, Gentle Giant had started off with the name Simon Dupree. Sounds like a separate artist, but they'd actually had a hit record. They'd come from the world of pop, from British pop. And then, with the formation of Gentle Giant, they wanted to really explore challenging music. Now, of course, the term progressive rock hadn't really coalesced around this time in '69 when they were forming the band. You know, King Crimson had only just released In the Court of the Crimson King. All sorts of different rock bands were looking at ways of expanding rock music to say something more powerful, both musically and from a meaning point of view. So Gentle Giant set about really pushing the envelope. By their second album, Acquiring the Taste, which was called that because that is precisely what you're going to need to do with the Gentle Giant album, because this music's difficult, it's extremely complex, and it's quite off-putting in a way. I mean, bands like Yes and Jethro Tull are complex, and yet they sold millions and millions of records. Gentle Giant never quite achieved that sort of success, although they were a good middle-level band, able to tour, able to play reasonable venues, and able to, bring out albums throughout this period when progressive rock ruled the world. Their drummer leaves after Acquiring the Taste. They get another drummer in, Malcolm Mortimer, very complex jazz-style drummer. He plays on the brilliant Three Friends. Three Friends brings in a conceptual aspect to the band and tells the story of three friends who went to school, who then meet up later on, and all the different avenues they've gone on, and it sort of forms a different sort of pathway. Some have gone down the scientific academic route, some have gone down the artistic route. But I think this idea of the meeting of friends in the 1970s from your younger days seems to be a theme on this album. Then with the acquisition of John Weathers on drums, I feel they finally find their sound. John Weathers did the genius thing in a band that was so complex of ploughing the groove all the way through it. And unlike many progressive rock drummers at the time, he plays a very fat groove. I find Gentle Giant very, very groovy. Not all the time, but when they hit a groove, to me, they're as funky as James Brown or Parliament Funkadelic. They are so funky and groovy. They release, after Three Friends, you get Octopus, The Power and the Glory. Although, actually, Power and Glory may have come in after this, I'm not quite sure. I've literally been listening to the album for a couple of days, this new version. And I've walked in completely cold to try and react to what I've heard rather than just to, reiterate bits off Wikipedia to you. But the point is if we look at the history of progressive rock, many of the prog bands seem to go on that journey. They are progressing. People are buying the next album because they want to see if they can go further out. And there is a race to go further out. From the torch lighting album that is In the Court of the Crimson King. So many bands, whether it's Jethro Tull or Pink Floyd or Yes or Genesis, are advancing to a certain point. In 1972, I feel it's that magic point where everybody is exploring stuff and they're allowed to explore stuff and the labels are backing it up. And in 72, we see a whole range of albums which are incredible in the breadth they try to reach. In 1973, we see them all now at the peak of the mountain, and they feel that they can do no wrong. Yes has made in 72 Close to the Edge, then they move on to making Tales from Topographic Oceans. Some would see it as an overreach, some would see it as being their high point. Genesis, progressed from Nursery Crime through Foxtrot to Selling England by the Pound. And by 73, 74, they're doing Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Perhaps an overreach. Emerson, Lake and Palmer are going up by 73. They're doing the outlandish Carnival 9, Brain Salad Surgery. And then the following year, after taking a break actually, and I think it's around about 76, 77, they come out with Works, which again is an overreach. Gentle Giant seem to plough a steady course. The only other band I can think that we could compare them could compare them to would be Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull plough a very similar aspect in prog. Underlying it all, they're a blues band, but they bring in this English aspect and they wind that in and then start to create this almost absurdist complexity. 72, we see Jethro Tull bringing in Thick as a Brick. And then in 73, we get Passion Play, which some would see as an overreach. I actually think it's even greater than Thick as a Brick. In 74, bands start to realise that they can't keep going up the mountain, that they have reached the peak, and they start to wind themselves in or implode. That's the two choices. At this point, Gentle Giant then start to wind themselves in. I don't believe then that they were ever any more proggy than they are on this album. So this definitely really is a representation of, for me, Gentle Giant at the peak. And because Gentle Giant are so out there, I feel that this is the album you've got to go to, because Gentle Giant are like prog's prog. All right? This is unbelievably complex music. Conceptually, it's very, very difficult music to analyse what they're actually singing about. It's not an obvious concept like Thick as a Brick or Close to the Edge. It's not obviously an epic. And Gentle Giant didn't make epics. But on here, I believe we get the closest to Gentle Giant being epic. This album comes out, like I said, the releases are great, and it sort of misfires. And I feel Gentle Giant's great moment sort of got lost later on, the interest in Gentle Giant kept growing and growing and growing. And with the internet, I think the band was able to, monetize and collect together the fan base. It was pretty big, this cult following. They were able to start re-releasing the tracks, the albums to them, often getting hold of the master tapes and remixing them, because I feel that the original albums always suffered a little bit from production, perhaps because Gentle Giant weren't in the top tier like Yes or Jethro Tull. This album, however, they were never able to get the master tapes from, so we've never had a release. It doesn't exist in a glossy box set like Octopus or Power and the Glory. All of that has been done by the band. But now, through the wonders of AI, whilst we're still in that little blip in human history where it hasn't decided to kill us, it can be utilised to separate the tracks on a master tape. Right, so let's explain this a little bit for non-musicians. When you record in the studio, you're recording everything separate. You've got the bass drum on first track, snare drum on track 2, the drum kit is all on separate tracks, guitar on a separate track, vocals on a separate track, and then it's mixed. And when you mixed it, you EQ it, you set the volumes, and you create the overall picture, often adding effects like delay, reverb and stuff like this. I feel that some of the original mixes of Gentle Giant are a little bit heavy on the reverb for me, and then when I check them out live where they haven't got that, often those versions are better for me than the studio versions. I'm very rarely think like that, but I feel that the tracks I'm playing the live album are a little bit better in some cases than the ones on the studio album. But anyway, all that Gentle Giant had was this one mix. So you cannot go in and divide anything up. There's no way of going back and remixing it and redoing the mistakes that the person who produced it or mixed it did in the early days, which I think has got a lot to do with the fact that when you have progressive music, what the bands are doing is progressing the music, and the engineers have to try and keep up. If you think of someone like Giorgio Gomelsky coming into the Beatles on Revolver and being a young chap, maybe not as experienced as, George Martin and the other people that were around them at the time, but young enough to be able to go, right, I get this, and deliver the goods for the Beatles, thus changing the history of music. And I feel when it comes to mixes, often when you go back to some of these progressive rock albums, the drums aren't mixed heavy enough, there's not enough bass in there, there's not enough separation, the panning is sometimes a bit awry, and it affects the mix. When the mix is brilliant, when you've got someone like Ken Scott at the helm, it often sounds incredible. People don't realise how much the mix is the maker or breaker on the success of an album. So suddenly AI allows you to separate all the parts in a mix, and then they can remix it. Now AI hasn't mixed this. What it's done is separate everything down to its original tracks, and then they've been able to remix from there. So the big thing about this album is we are finally hearing it like the band intended. That a wrong is being righted, basically. I nearly said a right has been wrong, because I sometimes feel, and I've said this on other videos recently, that this idea that we take masterpieces like Close to the Edge and we give it to Stephen Wilson, he remixes, what is the point? The album sounds amazing. It is amazing. I think we can adjust that for albums that perhaps the artist didn't feel were successful or artistically hit the spot. And I think with this, if this had been mixed properly at the time and had a proper release, I think we would be seeing this as we see a Tales from Topographic Oceans or A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. We would see at least as the prog peak of Gentle Giant, and in my opinion, their greatest work. So, I think this is exciting. I never buy remixes of anything. I just don't care. I'll go buy the old vinyl and listen to that. But in this case, as soon as this became available, I ain't going to buy the bloody box set. I don't want any extra versions or anything, or 5.1. I don't want that. But I did go and buy the CD off Burning Shed, by the way. That's where I got it from. And here it is. And I've been listening to it since I got it. And my God, it's this is a brilliant album. Don't expect me to review this and not say it's a brilliant album. This is an amazing album, and I think it is my favourite Gentle Giant album. I've got to explain to you why I think it's so great and why I think this is worthwhile. Now, in terms of the new mix, I do have my reservations, and I'm going to tell you what they are now. AI, right? AI is not stripping everything away and giving you that bass on its own. It's not doing that. Okay, if you went into the studio and you got the multi-tracks and you just turn the bass up and then mix that off, you have now a recording of what the bassist played on that album. AI doesn't do that. What AI does is it listens to it and it goes, this is what the bass sounded like. And it gives you their impression of what the bass is doing. Now, some could argue, well, that's exactly the same, isn't it, Andy? Well, it may well be, I don't know. But I tell you something, if that track has been mixed, you cannot get a separate bass out of that. The only way you can do it is by AI going, this is my impression of it. And it's got better and better, the AI has, but it is always an impression of what the bass was playing. Now, if the mix is absolutely terrible and the bass is lost at this point, what happens to the AI? The AI might guess at it, change one of the notes. I don't know. Who knows? I'm very interested to see how that works. Now, once they've got the separate tracks, then they can mix it in a modern way using a computer, using a digital audio workstation, and they could start to do all sorts of different fixes, stretching things, you know, moving things around, tuning things in. Now, this has a resplendent perfection over it that could well be the genius of Gentle Giant. I don't know. Or it could have been fixed a little bit. I don't know. But one thing my ears can hear, now I cannot say this is categorically the case, it's just my ears telling me this. They may be wrong. But to me, the drum sounds are a little bit too consistent for the 1970s. They sound triggered. The bass drum and the snare drum sound triggered. They've been replaced. So you're not hearing if I am correct. And I don't know. I'm throwing it out to you to find out if you can do the research and come back in the comments. And if it is a real big issue, I will come back and discuss this. But I feel that I'm listening to modern drum sounds, not 1970s drum sounds. Also, the snare drum seems to be changing its sound a little bit at certain points, so that means they would have gone from a different sample. But what is more apparent is the drums have been mixed in a very, very modern way. If you listen to sort of modern hip-hop, modern pop music, you get bass drum and snare drum. Hi-hats have been reduced down unless it's that old bloody crickets chirping that they used to do. On this, the hi-hats are almost silent. We're hearing bass drum and snare drum. This is a very prog metal approach to production, and those sounds are very penetrating. Now, I have to say, I think that John Weathers was playing the drums with that sound in mind. You know, when he is just crashing 4/4 through stuff and all this mayhem's going on, but he's going boom, boom. He was after what we could call that John Bonham sound, except John Bonham doesn't sound like that. If you go and listen to the actual sound of Bonham's bass drum and snare drum, they're actually quite thin. What you're hearing is a lot of room sound, and the way that that is been sat in the mix and just levels and the drums are up front. This isn't like that. This has a very modern sounding mix. Now, if you accept that that is the new mix, then you start to go, well, maybe we do need a mix of all the Gentle Giant albums. And what about all the Yes albums? You know, I want to hear everything with the drums re-triggered, you know, and if there's any messy bits, you know, get them in time and stuff like that. I don't know. That's the problem. That's the issue. That's what I'm listening to. In terms of the sound, though, it's glorious. And if you don't care about stuff like that, and you're just listening to it, you know, if you're interested in just the music, the pure music and enjoying it, you will enjoy this. It sounds stunning. So my next question, as I listen to this album, is why bother? Why should we bother going back to this album? Why is it important for us to go and listen to it again? Recently I did a video and it seems to have divided you lot in half. where I went and listened to Argus by Wishbone Ash, a classic album I've known about for around about 46 years, but that I've never really sat down and listened to. And when I listened to it, for me personally, it left me wanting more. More music, more composition, more interest, you know, better guitar solos, better production. It just didn't hit the spot for me. I didn't quite get it. And I thought, well, I'm going to tell that to my audience. And half of you, mainly the ones who hadn't heard the album, just went and checked it out because I'd mentioned it. People listening to it for the first time didn't seem to like it. But people who had listened to it for years and years and years loved it. Well, if you've been listening to this album by Gentle Giant for years and years and years, then you love it, don't you? You loved it from day one. So the question is, do you need another mix of it? Surely you're happy with the mix. Well, maybe you just want to hear it with a new mix. I have to be honest, when this happens, I often find myself still liking the old Duff mix because that's the thing I love. That's what I love. So I find this quite a difficult question to answer. My feelings with Argus was that in 1972, when the album came out, it really meant something. But as time has gone on, its importance, the sound of the music, what they're playing, what they're doing, the things that they pioneered that then people have taken on to do better. I don't know. I just felt like it was of its time. And I felt that, you know, the 50 odd years since its release had not really done it much favours. With this album, however, I feel the complete opposite. I feel that the brilliance of this album is actually down to the time it's in, but what we can learn from exploring what this album is about now. There is something that penetrates the culture now, which is really important. Gentle Giant, if you were to stop just thinking of the complexity or the beauty of the music, because the music is so beautiful. I have a problem with a lot of modern prog metal because, yeah, it's very complex and hard to play. But I think that very complex thing they're playing, do I like it musically? Is it catchy or has it got something compelling about it? And often it doesn't. It's just up and down scales and fast bits and stuff like this. With Gentle Giant, every bit of complexity sounds beautiful musically. They have a way of constructing music like a little Swiss watch, and everything is working together, but not at the same time. They have this sort of, you know, it's got a name musically, but basically it's like rather than everyone playing in unison, right? The body of the music or the flow of the music is divided throughout the band. Sometimes they're playing very syncopated patterns, but John Weathers is really holding it down, so you actually feel these jumps and starts and things that are going on. But the reason why I think this was not as successful as, say, a Jethro Tull or a Yes, is that in Jethro Tull's case, they would often have vocal hooks. You know, and Ian Anderson had got that very characteristic voice, which added to part of the hook. You know, so if you think of a film like not Aquaman, Anchorman, when Will Ferrell gets up and does his jazz flute solo, there's one bit where he just stands up and goes Aqualung, and there's your hook, and everyone knows what it is. That's an FM staple. In Yes's case, who made very complex music, that music is often uplifting in the way that, you know, romantic classical music is uplifting. They're building you up to a place. They're going to lift you up. Gentle Giant don't do that. Their complexity is best described as infernal, right? Some points, they're so funky and groovy. Some points they drop rock riffs in. Some points they're so catchy that you know that if they wanted to, if they had nailed some rock riffs and great singing and done all the stuff that they'd done, they would probably been much more successful, but it doesn't fit with the message of the band. And I think this band's got a message. And I go back to Three Friends because that storyline, why is that important to Gentle Giant? Why would Gentle Giant create an album where the concept is these people who are young and they're at school together, spending all that time together, and then later on they meet. Now, what's interesting is this album is structured in such a way that we haven't got epics on it, but we've got long tracks that bookend a short track. And so you'll get a great big chunk of Gentle Giant for about 7 minutes, then you get a little short track, and then you get another big chunk, and then you turn it on to side 2, you get a big chunk, and then a little short track, and then another big chunk. And the big chunks are really complex, and they deal with all these different things. But on this album, the little tracks are interesting when you look at those first, because they're the most bite-sized bits. It's the meat of this prog sandwich, isn't it? Now, the album is called In a Glass House, of course. And as I'm undoing it to look at the lyrics, I realise I've got to put it all back now, sorry, because I want to show you this. Because the other thing that's interesting is that this album also had a very complex album cover, where it had like a piece of glass in, and you could open it up and all that type of thing. And I think later issues didn't have that. So that was another thing that sort of fogged the vision of this album for the general public. Everything is sort of elusive. Now that's actually quite interesting, because this album seems to be about the elusive. Here we have it on CD. It actually works a lot better, because here we have the outer casing. When we pull it out, this feels like glass, and they are actually literally in a glass house, so then we can take them out and we're into the album here. Now, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. That is the saying. And the album opens up with, obviously, glass being smashed. We hear in the stereo field crash, 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 and then this forms a little bit like the things that you buy stuff on in shops, shop tills, in the cash registers in Dark Side of the Moon. It forms into like a loop, or to be more accurate, like the theme to Are You Being Served, for people who lived in England in the 1970s. And this forms, I think 73 was a big year for creating tape loops of such a quality. So it forms into this loop, and then the track comes in. So I'm thinking, well, what does this mean in a glass house? You know, you shouldn't throw stones. It means that we're not perfect, are we? We have our own sins. It's a little bit like the phrase, those without sin cast the first stone, or judge not lest ye shall be judged. So there's this idea there, but this idea here is expanded on this album, I believe, because there is a really strange aspect of existentialism in Gentle Giant. They look at the world not in a knowing way. They don't want to rule the world like ELP, right? And they don't want to float off into ecstasies of just aesthetic floatiness like Yes. You know, they don't want to do that. They are expressing an aspect of us looking out into the world and seeing the chaos and not knowing what is going on. I don't understand it. Now, of course, with 3 friends, these kids go to school, they grow up in that sort of structure, they're all the same, and then they go off and do their different things. And I thought, you know, this seems to be a perennial theme for Gentle Giant, at least on these 2 albums. So if we go to the shorter tracks first and try and analyse them from this point of view, the little track, the little meat in the big prog sandwich on side 1 is a tune called An Inmate's Lullaby, and these are the lyrics. Lying down her in the afternoon in my pretty cosy little cushioned room, I could talk to all my funny friends in here. I was told to rest, why I am not clear. Eating flowers growing in the garden where there are tasty tulips, and I don't care. If I wet my trousers, there was no time. I had nowhere else to go, nowhere else could I find. So this story, The Inmate's Lullaby, And it's a beautiful English. They're playing. It's the thing with Gentle Giant. They can stop rocking on the guitar, bass, and drums and all that, and they can move over to violin and glockenspiel and flute and all these different. And it sounds like this weird English music, you know, almost like medieval music, but it's not, because it's crazy, and it really reflects, I think, an aspect of the English aesthetic that goes towards the surreal, that goes through the Goons back to Edward Lear or Alice in Wonderland, and within that is a philosophical aspect. Of course, Gentle Giant were into R.D. Laing. Now, R.D. Laing had spoken in London at a convention that also included Allen Ginsberg and Herbert Marcuse. This was postmodernism, existentialism coming in to the counterculture in London in 1967. I would be really interested to see whether those ideas influenced Gentle Giant in artistically what they're trying to do here. R.D. Laing was someone that had ideas that are best described as seeing insanity from the subjective view of the lived experience, the I, the subjective, to look and think, well, what's it like to see the world through the eyes of a madman? And maybe they see it correctly. Are they seeing it correctly? And when you've swallowed a whole bunch of postmodernism, if you've read Foucault's work on the prison system, you start to see that perhaps, you know, the system is putting people there to hold them in, that the system is corrupt and not quite right. We have this idea of one flew over the cuckoo nest, so it becomes about power struggles and all that type of thing. So we have, to me, this very English picture of insanity where we're seeing it from the point of view of the inmates in a lunatic asylum, if you're still allowed to call them those. Now, flip it over and go to the meat in the prog sandwich on side 2, and I think we have the key to the album here. This is a Kerry Minnear sung vocal, and Kerry Minnear, so just to say, you've got Derek Shulman on vocals, you've got his brother Ray Shulman on bass. Derek Shulman's got this really virtuoso, thick, operatic but meaty voice. Kerry Minnear's got this very delicate voice, and they contrast brilliantly. I love when Kerry Minnear sings, and he sings this: meeting in this way, who could have known how our destinies and ways apart have grown? Looking still the same after all these years, changing only in my memories not clear, and believing all futures we should share. Fate designed playing nature's mime, today by chance we meet again after this time. This tune's called The Reunion. So obviously they're describing a reunion, and it's a reunion that has just happened. They've bumped into some people that they knew when they were younger. Meeting in this way no one could have known, sharing thoughts and deeds simple, harmony plans and hopes erased in our maturity. Hopes erased in our maturity. Now tomorrow's dreams are now yesterday. Now there's a spelling mistake on here, right? This line is key. It's such a shame, and it might be just the continuing curse of the fact that this album gets obscured. It says tomorrow's dreams and now yesterday. And what he actually sings is, now tomorrow's dreams are now yesterday. What we have here is a description of the utopian dream of the 1960s, which puts in motion that sort of, you know, Dionysian world that promised a new future in the 70s, in the future. A generation swept up by that, believing that they could change the world and creating music that they felt would free people. And yet it didn't happen. And these progressive rock bands actually paint a picture in the early 70s of the crumbling of that dream. Right? And I think Gentle Giant personify this brilliantly. So the sort of Wagnerian pomp and wonder that young people thought rock music could have, that quality of being heavy, of being, intellectually at the same level as classical music, like we're artistically at the same level. These teenagers have been knocked down. We're talking just a matter of years. We're talking, they're probably talking 65 to 73, so it's 8 years. Now, the track before this is called Experience. Again, Kerry Minnear sings. Once I was a boy, an innocent to life and my role in it. This world played my game, and anyone a clown or a foil for myself. The harmless affairs, and no one seemed to care for any meaning. My life was my own, the debt I paid it to myself. The unseeing youth, how can it be so shallow and short-sighted? These years pass by to realise the folly of these unripe years. Now I'm a man, I realise my unworldly sins pained many lives. Yet I heard with ears that wouldn't listen, and still I watched and I saw with blinkered eyes. But with age, the conscience slowly dawns, and bonds of duty gently tied. All my sins seen through, now there is experience collecting in an act of virgin guise. Master inner voices making any choices. Once I could rebel, and consequences then had no reflection. And I am a man, and I am bound by adult age and discretion. So there is the feeling that they have grown up and they're having to smell the coffee. The reality, the existential reality that there is no utopia, and that they are being pulled into something which they don't understand. They're looking out going, well, I can't make sense of this. It made sense when I was younger. I haven't learned anything. I've lost whatever I've lost. And then the metaphor of In the Glass House starts to make sense. And on the final track, we get the sort of big epic of the album, which is incredibly complex, where the glass house is painted as something that I am in and you're in. And when we look out, we see the reflection of the glass. We see ourselves. We can't see out into the world. And a little bit like Plato's cave, that there are shadows out there. And at night time, when we go into the more irrational, dreamlike state, and it goes dark, we're able to see shadows. And those shadows are like consequences of what we are and who we are. I'll read a little bit from this one. Narrow the field of aim in any direction. Do what I feel just to see my reflection. Shadow fills the light until the glass house becomes night. Dark is gleaming, or I am dreaming. Right, so this idea that the night of being able to regress into these more insane, irrational parts of our being. And then the complexity seems to make sense, because Gentle Giant's complexity is always one that's devolving. It's always spinning down. It's like a trap. They will start off with very beautiful music, very ethereal, medieval English music. And the English aesthetic is something that we all recourse back to as Englishmen, as something which is comforting. I had a phone call from an old friend of mine who is wanting to talk to me about my politics. I often get sort of portrayed as being sort of right-wing, and I don't think I am. Illiberal, which I'm not, because there's certain ideas that if you question them in the way that they were questioning ideas back in the 60s, early 70s, there's a certain set of people that don't want you to do that, and they react against you. They react in a totalitarian way. So some of the things I say, this guy's seen, and he goes, can I ring you up? And he realised that, where my real opinion lay. But the thing that we both landed on was this idea of the English aesthetic, of being an Englishman, in being that the embodiment of being an Englishman is almost like an ideal. No one can be it, but you can try and go towards it. And it is a state of tolerance and basically not being affected by all these highfalutin ideas, all this continental philosophy, all this pomposity that you get in elsewhere in the world, all the sureness. You sort of go, I don't know. And you answer it with this sort of weird but cozy surrealism. And I feel that that English aesthetic, because there's never been a band that embodies the English aesthetic like the Gentle Giant. But at the same time, there's moments where they are so heavily funky and groovy. Those two things together, I just absolutely love. When the final track emerges in a glass house, it starts up. One of them's playing electric violin, and it's like the Mahavishnu Orchestra. You have this idea of almost like Celtic folk music, Indian music, and then rock music and the blues all working together in perfect harmony. But with this, it devolves and it spirals a little bit like, the only way I can describe this is like this music always hits the scratch on the turntable, so it then starts to go into that loop. You know when your stylus is stuck in the scratch on the record and you're just going round, and it sounds quite interesting, but it goes nowhere. So often the complexity, rather than reaching the sunlit uplands of a Yes track, devolves into some sort of infernal loop that's just going around, and it's pleasant, but it's like you're trapped in something that you can't get out. You're trapped within the glass house and you're trying to peer through it. Gentle Giant's artistic or musical goal is to disorientate you with the complexity. It's not there to show off. They're not interested in you thinking they're great players or they can play really fast. What they're interested in is disorientating you and tying you up with knots, which they've on Octopus physically embody in the music. So I think when we put this album on, this explores an aspect of the 1960s utopia, which has become a trap for us now. And we are stuck in that loop, going round and round, trying to find our way out. And the only way you can work your way out is to be able to hold up all those utopian ideas, which are wonderful in their essence, but have become a trap for us in Western culture. And you have to move away, right? You have to move away by going, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I have an opinion. I don't know what my opinion is. I actually don't know. I'm confused. I don't know. Because whatever they were describing in embryo here in the early 70s with that utopian dream never happened. Now, that utopian dream has become the subject of adverts or the subject of educational directives. And our society now is far more about compliance than it is about the sort of Nietzschean, the Rustra-like expression, self-expression that was being championed at the time in the 1960s and the early 70s. A few years later, this stuff would be met with the nihilism of punk, and punk would not put this stuff under the microscope and question it. It would not ask what it is to be that generation, not the first generation that made this 1960s, but the second generation that then was able to blossom in it, only to find that you'd blossomed into a sort of rotten fruit. And then the next generation come in, rather than being born late 40s, early 50s, now we're into the mid 50s, they're 20, 1976, that sort of age group come in and go, nah, we're not playing this game anymore. And they just walk away from it, not really understanding that the prog lot had already worked this out and were working at it in their own way. But of course, in the world of pop music, you get to a certain age and you're cast aside. So that's my take on the album. Now, this has been a very serious video. And I feel like sometimes I make comedy videos, sometimes I do serious videos. Nobody really watches the serious videos, but those of you who have watched at this point go, well, Andy was actually really trying his hardest to say something more than just, well, I quite like it, and I think the new mix is quite good, and I quite like this bit here, and I haven't tried to do that. I've tried to explain why I think this album is so great, but I thought it would be important to get another opinion, really, And so I got my mate Lionel. I said, Lionel, I said, do you want to come down and have a chat about this Gentle Giant album as well? I can't believe I'm about to do this. I'm going to do it. It has to happen on this video. I'm going to do it. No, don't, Andy, don't do it. You're talking to yourself now. No, you're going to do it. They don't want this. They're serious music fans. They don't want this. I don't care. I don't care. It's my way of creating balance in a video like this has been so pretentious and arty-farty. It's by bringing in Lionel. Lionel, you know, how are you doing, mate? Hello, Andy. How are you? I'm all right. Did you listen to the Gentle Giant album? I did indeed, yes. It was very, it was very, lots of stuff going on in it, yes. What did you like it? Well, I don't know really. It was going on for a long time, wasn't it? Well, what didn't you like about it? Well, I don't know really. It was like they went, you know, piddly piddly poo, tiddly piddly pee, piddly poo, piddly tiddly pee, like that. There's loads of tiddly piddly bits. Yeah, tiddly piddly bits. Yes, loads of tiddly piddly bits. I might have forgot to do the mouth. Loads of tiddly piddly bits there, and I didn't really like those bits. What about the singing? Well, there was two singers on, and there was one I liked. He sounded a little bit like me singing, and he'd go, oh, hey, I'm doing lots of things, meeting my friends, and doing all sorts of things like that. And then there was this other bloke who shouted at me and going, rah, 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 like that, yeah. So that was it. That was interesting. Did you get anything from the meaning of the lyrics? I didn't listen to the lyrics at all. I don't listen to lyrics. What about the music? I didn't really listen to the music. I just really listened to the beat, and then I listened for something that I like, you know, to something I can sort of latch on to, that's like just so you could chant along to. What sort of thing would that be? I don't know. I can't tell really. What do I mean? Well, can you sing something that would be like that you like? Yes, I can if you want. Like something like this. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it. Oh, that was very good. And you gave them a little look then. Yes, I want to see what they were like. Do you want to have a proper look at them? Yes, if I could, yes. Oh, look at them all. They're all bit. They're all so old. Yeah, they're all very old, yes. I don't think they watch puppets like this. No, I don't think they're interested in puppets, are they? No, not at all. I'm looking at them now, and yeah, they're all really, really old and grey. Yeah, some of them find it funny. Yeah, some of them find it funny. I think so. But a lot of them aren't finding it funny. No, I didn't think they would. But I enjoyed you being here, Lionel, and I'm gonna always. Oh, you're nice, aren't you? I am quite nice. I'm only little. You're a lion, though. Yeah, but I'm a little lion. A little lion, not a little liar. Do you remember the little liar? Who was the little fella that used to say that? Oh, you little liar. That was Bobby Ball, the great Bobby Ball. I liked them. They were really good. I think if Gentle Giant had had more sort of cannon and ball bits in it, it would have been a lot better. So maybe some funny jokes and a few impressions. No, they don't really do that progressive rock. No, they don't, do they? Anyway, this is Lionel the Lion, and I've brought him in. And I think, you know, when I'm talking about certain things, it's very easy. Because he's a puppet, you know. He's not real. It's me doing the voice. If you notice that mind blips, and I will get that better. I'm just working on once I've got the voice, you know, yeah, once I've got the voice, I will then try and work on good. Hello there, Andy, Lionel the Lion. But that's going to be really hard for me. Anyway, I'm not pretending he's real. Don't worry about it. I know you're all older gentlemen, and I know you're not fooled by something like this. But I just thought it's you know, often I like to have a conversation on here with myself and explore different aspects of it. And Lionel, yes, ooh, he likes that. Lionel did a good job, didn't you, Lionel? You did do it. Did I do a good job, Andrew? Did I do a good job? I think you did. He did a good job of explaining what Gentle Giant sounds to for just the average Joe in the street, and why it is what it is. It's difficult music. It is difficult music, isn't it, Lionel? I think so difficult. I just thought it was more like rubbish. Anyway, let's finish up there. Do you want to say bye to them? Bye, everybody. Sorry, I'll do that again because I forgot. I was so busy doing the arm that I forgot to do the mouth. Let's try that again. Do you want to say goodbye to them? Bye, everybody. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I like when you said that, nice to meet you. You sounded like Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man. Oh, you shouldn't be talking about him in a nasty way. I watched that film. It was really upsetting. Poor Elephant Man. Yeah, I watched it the other day. It's on BBC iPlayer, you know. It is. It's ever so sad. No, I'm the Lion Man. Okay, Lion Man, let's go then. You can go now. Off you go. He's gone. Right, so that was a bit of puppetry fun. You know, it's always good to have a puppet on every now and then. Let's see how people enjoyed that. There's someone said to me the other day in the comments, they said it's always wise to stay to the end of the video. It is, because I make more money. I've got to try and keep retention here. And so I like to put stuff in that you won't expect at the end of the video. You always should wait to the end of the video. You don't know what's going to happen. Because I tell you something, classic album review, he ain't going to have a bloody puppet on. No way. You know, none of them are. None of these other prog YouTubers doing this, talking about this. You know, they're all out there trying to, you know, get the views by reviewing this. None of them all have done it as well as me, by the way. This will be this will be the platonic review. This is the one that everyone will refer to, because I went into so much depth and used my intellectual abilities. But then I also had a puppet on it, you see. Gentle Giant, In a Glass House, masterpiece. Don't go buy the box set, but go to Burning Shed, buy this CD, stick it in your collection. If you haven't got a Gentle Giant, start here. It might not be the easiest listen, but it's without doubt the most proggiest out there. Gentle Giant, it sounds amazing. I love it. I can't wait to listen to it again. Thank you very much for what? Oh, I got wind now. Thank you very much for watching.